You may have heard of routines that high performers follow to get into a state of peak performance. And some of you may have even tried some of those routines only to discontinue it after a while. But rather than blindly follow a routine that seems to work for another person, it may be more beneficial for you to learn about the 5 states of mind that you can leverage to get into your own peak performance state. Hi, I'm Divya Tampi. I'm a mid-career and an emotional wellness coach. I help mid-career professionals get career clarity and craft the career of their dreams. So let's start by asking the question, what is a mental state? So a mental state is a state of being which helps you to think or feel a certain way. There are 5 mental states that we are going to be talking about that you can deliberately choose so as to be able to perform at the highest level that you can. The first mental state that we'll be talking about is the meditative or the mindfulness state. So this is the best state for the mind to decompress, de-stress or energize itself. And the best way to think about the mindfulness state or the meditative state is to think about animals and the way they behave. Now, for example, you may see 2 birds which are fighting with each other and creating a cacophony of noises, only to see them a moment later sitting on the branch side by side with all their ruffled feathers smoothened out and looking into the ether as if nothing has happened. This happens because they are not worrying about what is going to happen in the future. They're not ruminating about what happened in the past. They are in the moment to moment. Okay, and this state of mind where you are completely in the moment is what is referred to as mindfulness. Now, you also can get into a state of mindfulness or meditativeness either by sitting down quietly at a place where you're not going to be disturbed and bringing your attention to the breath. Of course, there are many different ways in which you can carry out a meditation, and many of you may know that already. Other than this, you can also use various activities to get into the meditative state. For example, some people, when they go for a run, they feel meditative, because they're fully focused on the body. Or then when you go for a walk, or even when you're performing some of the low intensity chores at home, the ones that you're really familiar with, can also sometimes help you to get into the meditative state. You can also do this by spending time with nature, and getting totally engrossed in your experience of being with nature. The meditative state is particularly helpful when you practice it immediately after waking up, because it allows you to expand your mind and also calm it down and helps you to experience a sense of peace and groundedness. But you can also practice the state of mind when you're feeling stressed. You can do it multiple times a day, or even before you go to sleep, so that you have a better quality of sleep. The second state is the learning state. Now, think about Warren Buffett or Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, Elon Musk. Okay, these are some of the people who plan the learning state of mind into their daily life. They practice what is referred to as the 5-hour learning week. That means that they plan at least 1 hour of the day where they are learning. And it makes complete logical sense that you give your mind high quality inputs so that it can then generate high quality output. Now, when it comes to learning, the best thing for you to do is to practice learning actively rather than do it passively. So what is passive learning is when you are just reading a book or watching a video and trying to gather that information. Okay, the way to go about doing it actively is to read smartly, which means that you highlight the parts which you find interesting, you take down notes, that is your own reflections of what came up in your mind as you were reading that book. Use space repetition, wherein you go through the notes that you had taken down on the previous days, so that you are able to memorize those parts much better. Also apply these learnings that you have on a day-to-day basis so that you can totally internalize the learnings that you have. One more way to actually go about learning is when you apply, you learn better, of course, but also to hire a coach. because when you are with a coach, you can actually learn from them and learn from the discussions that you have. The third one is the thinking state. This is probably one of the most overlooked states of mind. While most people do take out time for learning and doing, but a large majority of people feel quite uncomfortable when it comes to scheduling time specifically for thinking. Now, when I say thinking, I'm not referring to, worrying about what's going to happen in the future or fuming about what happened in the past or the kind of things that people did. But I'm talking about more a deliberate kind of a thinking. You see, your imagination is one of your most valuable assets. And if you want to generate high quality action, it's important that you spend time in high quality thinking and imagination. So some of the common ways to spend time in the thinking state are by reflecting, by reframing, ideating, problem solving, decision making, brainstorming, planning, doing thought experiments, and even expressing. The fourth one is the flow state of mind. Many of you may be familiar with this idea of getting into the zone where you are able to perform your best work. Now, an example is, when a singer is singing extremely well and is so involved with that singing that she becomes unaware of the audience who's listening to her. Or you see a tennis player who's so totally engrossed in the game that he is unaware of all the people around or the announcements which are being made. They completely focus on the ball and the racket. This happens when you are in the zone or the state of flow. Now, there are three elements which are part of being in the flow, which means if you want to get into the state of flow, these three elements have to be present. The first one is clarity of goal. Now, whatever work you're doing or whatever task that you're performing, you need to have a good clarity about what the goal of that task is. There should be no confusion or conflict as far as the goal of the task is concerned. Now, goals need to be there at two levels. One is the overall goal of whatever you are doing, and then smaller goals within that big goal. For example, your overall goal may be to complete a project well, right? But within that project, you may have smaller goals like you need to collaborate with 5 people. Now, within that, you may have another goal that, okay, I want to call up at least 10 people so that I can decide who are the 5 people that I want to collaborate with. Now, within that, you have another goal of getting clear about what exactly do I want to communicate to those 10 people so as to be able to later decide whom I want to collaborate with. So you see what I'm talking about? Clarity of goal is one of the first elements which is required if one wants to get into the state of flow. The second element which is necessary for you to get into a state of flow is continuous feedback. Now, whenever you are performing a task, only if you get feedback continuously. Now, feedback can be sensory feedback or spoken feedback, or so sensory could be what you see, what you hear, what you feel, etc., etc. So then you know whether you're making progress in the right direction or whether you need to course correct. Now, an example would be if you are preparing a dish, being able to feel the texture of the dough, being able to see the changing color of the food gives you the feedback to decide if it is turning out the way you want it to turn out. The third element is a balance between the skills that you have and the task that you're doing. So if the skills that you have is way lesser than what the task requires, you may feel overwhelmed. On the other hand, if you are really very skilled and the task is very simple, then you are going to get bored or then you are going to get distracted very easily. It's almost like when you are playing a game of badminton with somebody who is really a pro, you are going to lose the motivation to play. You are not going to be getting into the state of flow because you don't have the skill to match up to that person. On the other hand, if you are playing with a child who does not have the skill level like you do, then you are going to get bored very easily, right? Or you may be getting distracted very easily. Similarly, another example in work life could be that let's say that you are trying to create a website for yourself or your business and you are doing this for the first time. When you're trying to do this for the first time, you may not have the necessary skills required to do it, or you may be in the process of learning. Now, if you have learned enough, okay, then you could easily get into a state of flow where you are very, very clear about what you are trying to achieve in the next few hours. Right? On the other hand, if you do not know the basics of developing a website, you've never done it before, and you have to try and figure it out all by yourself, and you sit down to do it, it'll become quite difficult because you feel like your skill level is very low and the task requires far more. Okay, so you may get distracted very easily, you may get demotivated very easily. But even when you're doing a difficult task, or even when you're doing something which is completely new, there are ways in which you can actually maintain your motivation level and hence get into a state of flow. There are 3 ways in which you can do this. One, if it is a really difficult task, you can break it down into much smaller manageable pieces, which will allow you to be able to complete them and get a sense of progress. The second one, if it is a task which is quite easy, where your skill level is much higher, you could actually listen to focus music, which will prevent you from getting distracted or bored. Also, if you are going to be doing a task which is really very difficult, you may want to allocate more time, and that will allow you to keep your attention on what you're doing and thus get into the state of flow. By the way, none of these elements will help unless you keep away distractions for a minimum of 2 hours of period of time. You need to have at least that much period of time to be able to focus on this specific task that you're trying to do. If you are constantly changing tasks, it is almost impossible for you to get into the state of flow. And that brings us to the 5th state of mind. The 5th one is the sleep state. Good deep sleep. Matthew Walker, the author, in his book Why We Sleep, makes the statements. Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory and makes you more creative. It makes you look more attractive. It keeps you slim and lowers food cravings. It protects you from cancer and dementia. It wards off colds and the flu. It lowers your risk of heart attack and strokes, not to mention diabetes. You will even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. Are you interested? All of you must have guessed by now what he is referring to. He is referring to good old sleep. Just the way you need to charge your batteries to be able to speak on the phone, you need to charge yourself to be able to work at your peak. And that charge is good quality sleep. Because without good quality sleep, you will neither be able to focus nor be productive. And good sleep is probably one of the biggest productivity hacks. So we spoke about the 5 states of mind that you can leverage. Let me recapture what those 5 states are. The first one is the mindfulness or the meditative state. The second one is the learning state. The third, the thinking state. The fourth, the flow state of the mind. And the 5th is the sleep state. If you were to deliberately and consistently spend time in all these 5 states of mind on a daily basis, you would be able to perform at your peak levels at will. Thank you so much for watching. This is Divya Tampi signing off. Till the next video.